With you. Mohammed Mursi obviously was credited with brokering that ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. It seemed that within hours, all of a sudden, he swept away with all these powers, saying his word will ride over judges. Was he emboldened, taking advantage of his success?
Without doubt, he knew he had enough political capital to make this move. And don't forget, just before he'd brokered peace, he had also signed a deal with the IMF for a $4 billion loan program. So with all those developments in the international scene, he thought he had enough credibility now to go after the judges that it was rumoured would somehow control and curtail his own powers on December the 2nd. There was all of this going on in the background, but what he undermined and what he failed to understand, that this is a new Egypt in which nobody can get away with that level of control of power around them without the street rising to be the check and balance that we've seen happen over the last 3 days.
Amr, what is your point of view on this? Is this something that people in Egypt will accept?
Definitely not. At least a broad segment of our population is not accepting it, and is not accepting it for good reasons and clear reasons. One, we have lived for 60 years under presidential sweeping powers, and we have suffered from them. Secondly, we elected democratically a president who acquired prerogatives and authorities which are more than enough for him to be an active president in shaping Egyptian politics, in shaping domestic politics and regional politics, and he does not need additional prerogatives and authorities. Thirdly, Egyptians have always held the judicial branch of government in very high regards, and they do not like any lack of autonomy or independence of the judicial branch of government to be part of what our new reality after the revolution is all about.
Amr, could this be something that's good for you, though? You know, I said former member of parliament, obviously, because it is the judges in Egypt that dissolve parliament, putting you out of your job. And now that Morsi is trying to seize power from the judges, I mean, is this something that could end up being good?
No, let me tell you right away, and I'm here speaking as a political scientist as well. Countries which make it to a successful transition to democracy after democratic revolutions have always managed to build institutions and to respect checks and balances. What Morsi does is basically to freeze checks and balances. And I am not aware of any dictatorship which has been a dictatorship for 2 months or 3 months, and countries have managed, which suffer from a temporary, so-called temporary dictatorship, which managed to transition to democracy. If we freeze checks and balances, if we suspend the independence of the judicial branch of government, I guess we will not make it, and it's not going to be helpful for Egypt to restore back a people's assembly, that chamber of the parliament which I was member of and which was dissolved by a ruling of the Supreme Constitutional Court. We will not be well served in terms of our democratic transition by bringing back an assembly where we do have constitutional doubts of its legality.
Ed, interesting he uses the word dictatorship, that you don't normally see a dictatorship for a couple of months. And Amr is not alone in people who are characterizing what Morsi has done here as a dictatorship. The Wall Street Journal editorial page today said Egypt's Islamist coup, the Muslim Brotherhood's man claims more power than even Mubarak had. What's the risk to the United States if Morsi becomes an Islamist dictator?
I think we should hold our horses. Morsi is many things, but he's not yet an Islamist dictator. The fact that Professor Hamzawy can speak in free terms from Cairo now to us is an indication that freedom of speech is still very much alive in Egypt. And it's also an indication that Mubarak is no longer in power. And, you know, Morsi is dependent on the US for aid, dependent on the IMF for signing off that program, dependent on the European Union. International opinion will not allow for for Morsi to go ahead and consolidate power around him.
You said Mubarak, I know.
It's a total Freudian slip. But,
right. Well, Amr, what do you think about that? Is Morsi a long way away from being an Islamist dictator?
Well, let me first of all highlight the fact that in terms of freedom of expression, I could speak to you 3 and 4 years ago from Cairo and freely, as I have done just right now. And I did speak several times to CNN, criticizing measures and policies took and put forward back then by the deposed president and his government. So in terms of freedom of expression, it's not a huge leap which we are witnessing. We had it before. But let me remind you as well of the fact that at least one TV channel was closed in the last weeks, in a step which we consider in Egypt to be negatively imposing an autocratic limit, once again, on different TV channels which are critical of the president. However, the crucial point is if we suspend checks and balances, if we do not get to safeguard the independence of the judicial branch of government in a moment in which we do not have a legislative branch of government, and it's on hold until we have our new constitution, Morsi is de facto a president who has sweeping executive, sweeping legislative, and once again puts himself powers and puts himself above the judicial branch of government. That is a very dangerous mix, which can only lead to a dictatorship. And once again, we will not accept to have a dictatorship for a few weeks or a few months. And regardless of Morsi's legitimation, that Constitution declaration of last Thursday needs to be brought down.